You really have to understand what they're doing and how they're accomplishing it. Otherwise, you're just another used car salesman.
Bruce, we got you on the podcast. Welcome to the show.
Full circle moment here, having you kind of be the first guest.
We started back in the mid-'80s. Our business really evolved with healthcare changes. There was a huge need for us to come in and help with the revenue cycle on the patient pay side. There wasn't anything on the patient pay side.
Like private pay collections, it's not really, I guess, the sexiest topic, but it's critical, right?
Believe it or not, the cash recovery was less than 50%. So half of their patient pay dollars were being left on the table. When we go in and put a discipline in place, we can see a lift of 20-25% within 90 days.
This was awesome. We can't thank you enough for sharing your insights. This might go viral, so stay tuned.
Bruce, we got you on the podcast. Welcome to the show. Thanks so much for being here. Really appreciate you taking the time to sit through the next, however long this takes to get through, but I think it's going to be a fun time.
Hey, I really appreciate the invitation. This is great to have you, and certainly love speaking to our partners, and especially NikoHealth has been a great partner for us.
Awesome. Glad to hear that.
Bruce. Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about some background about you? So, for the listeners who don't know who Bruce is, who are you? What do you do? What goes on?
You bet. Well, the Allegiance Group has been around quite a while. We started back in the mid-'80s, and we were at that time focusing on bad debt recovery. And our business really evolved with healthcare changes. And as soon as competitive bidding came into play and the shift of responsibility went from the payer to the patient, everybody started figuring out, hey, we have to figure out how to collect from the patient now. And so there was a huge need for us to come in and help with the revenue cycle on the patient pay side. There was, countless number of billing services out there to help people with claim submission, but there wasn't anything on the patient pay side. So we actually had a national company that we started working with, and they wanted an end-to-end solution. So we developed that product. That was in the mid-'90s, and then it's evolved from there. And really, it's evolved with the industry because it's changed a lot in the last 20 years. And so we really saw a need to really work with the software system providers and provide this end-to-end solution on the patient pay side because there just wasn't anything out there. And Niko was one of the first ones to really do a full integration where you really had this seamless, ability to go ahead and manage your patient AR from day one all the way through final collections, and you don't have to leave your platform. So it's just it's a great solution.
Bruce, I think that's why it makes sense to have you as our first guest. You were actually, I think, one of the first integrations we ever did, which feels like forever ago. So full circle moment here, having you kind of be the first guest on.
It's you look back and you go, because we were trying to get relationships with any platform that was out there, and they were all getting consumed, and consolidated. And Niko came along, and it was a breath of fresh air because they were approaching it maybe differently than a lot of the other, I'll say, institutional or legacy type software systems out there. And, you always have to go through the trials and tribulations of starting a startup. I mean, we did the same thing, but boy, once you start getting momentum and people see that the product is really what you say it is, then it is, it's got to be fun to be able to sell the product because you can see the good it does for the providers that you're servicing. And those are partnerships. It's not transactional selling. It's really looking at how do we achieve the goals that our healthcare providers are trying to achieve together. versus, I'm going to buy this thing off the shelf and it's supposed to work.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, a lot of it, in DME, I always say it's a very big but small industry. So it's very relationship driven. And, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you've been in DME for over 15 years now.
Yep.
But I don't think that's where your story began. Kind of, I know you know the story of our early days. We'd love to kind of hear how your story began. How'd you end up in DME?
Yeah.
That's, I think our listeners would love to kind of hear the background behind Bruce Gehring, how you got to here. Because everyone
Really?
knows you.
No.
So
No.
I don't know if they know the story. Yeah, they
yeah. No, well, when they released me from prison, no, I'm sorry. No, I was actually, I came from a whole different industry. I graduated from college and I was in the hospitality industry. And I was sales and marketing for 17 years with Hyatt Hotels, another few years with IHG, which was the Intercontinental Hotel Group, and Starwood in there too. I was with Starwood for a while. Now that's all Marriott. But, it was a young person's industry. And I'll be real honest, we moved here to Kansas City after having moved 5 times in less than 10 years. And so my wife said, hey, one more move, wherever we land, you're going to stay. And so the reality was I loved it. And then, we were here in Kansas City for 7 years and they had asked me to move 3 times. And then the last time they came in and said, look, we need you to go here. So, make a decision. So I said, fine, I'm out. And just fortunately, one of my good clients in the hotel industry was starting it was a startup, a brand new company. It was actually a joint venture between a finance group out of Canada, and it was servicing the agricultural equipment industry. So I ended up getting into finance from that side and developing that business until about the dot-com bust, because that changed the whole industry completely. And we went through several consolidations of the principal ownership, and it was like 3 changes in 18 months from Newcorp Finance to Tyco to Textron to, it was crazy. So that whole relationship kind of fell apart. At the same time that was happening, a good family friend of ours was starting in this industry, and he needed somebody to help him do the business development. So he tapped me, and I came in and started working with him on the business development side. And I was really responsible for doing all the partnership relationships as well as selling the product and doing all that. So I was kind of in on the ground floor. We were just a small, 4-person office, and now we've got 16 people here in the U.S. and we've got another, 10 people overseas that help us with the back office and programming and all that. So
That's a pretty big learning curve going from that industry to this one, HME, DME, and all that. So what would you say is like the biggest part of that learning curve that you're able to shift from totally different industries?
I'd done it before, which, because it was from the hospitality industry, which it is what it is, into finance. So I had to learn in a whole new industry, talking about agricultural equipment industry. But, I guess it's, the attitude. I've always looked at, it's not a job, it's a career and it's a calling, and it's you have to have a passion for it. And I've always enjoyed the business development side of things. So learning about and constantly learning about the industry you're in and being engaged, it really pulls you in. And I think, it's pretty easy in the healthcare industry because you look at the end goal. I mean, we're really supporting providers that are helping patients live healthier lives, right? And so it has a good purpose behind it. So it's pretty easy to get on that bandwagon and say, let's help these people, help others. And so learning about the industry has always been, exciting because it's constantly changing, and it's it's just challenging to keep up with it and, meet those challenges. And that's what's exciting coming into work every day and figuring out what can we do to improve what we're doing and how we're engaging our customer and in improving on the results that we're getting. That's really the challenge.
Totally. And I know like private pay collections, it's not really, I guess, the sexiest topic, but critical, right? So
Right.
what do people still get wrong about collections in this industry?
Well, I think there's still a little bit of that, it's how we've done things, from the beginning, so it's, change is always a challenge for people that have always done this, we've always done it this way. But the reality is we do a lot of education when we go into a customer and talk about best practices and, and trying to really understand how they're conducting business today first. So you have some sort of benchmark or baseline to work from. And then it's really looking at, okay, where can our processes improve what they're doing and give them, the ability to go ahead and redirect resources, because what we're about is certainly, achieving better cash flow through the process and getting more of your cash, but it's also the efficiency. It's allowing your staff to focus on other things that are more important or more core to the values or the mission of the business. I mean, having people chase after $20 copays is not the most efficient use of that labor resource. It just isn't. And and Wayne, you hear this all day long. I mean, there aren't enough human resources out there to do all the jobs in these businesses that we service to accomplish everything they need to do on their own. It just isn't. That's been a big challenge.
Yeah, absolutely, Bruce. What's interesting is like in DME, I always tell people, you get paid what you get paid, right? So it's up to you to collect what's left over, and then you need to use technology to move the needle, because you can't charge the insurance more and the cost of goods sold are going up. So, and I'm sure you've seen tons of change over the years. What would you say is, over all these years and having to work with hundreds of DME providers, what is one lesson that you've learned that I would say you could pass along to other DMEs in the space when they're starting up? Because there are a lot of new, and I'm sure you experienced new startup DMEs entering the space just because the environment's become a little bit more favorable. There's not as many looming headwinds, but you're like me, have worked with hundreds and spoken to thousands. Any kind of one piece of advice for someone to think about just getting started?
Well, I think it's taking a look at start with the end in mind, right? We all want to get paid. So you have to take a look at the policies and procedures around your processes and how do you ensure getting the payment. And oh my gosh, to your point, Alex, I mean, people are just afraid to ask people to pay. They walk in and they're providing the equipment. Oh, we'll bill your insurance. No, there's going to be a copay for that. And it's not. We're in an industry that we're trying to care for people, so it's kind of natural that you don't want to create maybe some stress or whatever. But the reality is, we're in an industry that is trying to help the people live a healthier life. And to do that, they need these things that we're providing. So you're doing them a service. And you know what? The provider needs to be paid for those services. I mean, no profit, no mission, right? So we've got to be able to go ahead and not be afraid to put the policies in place and say, okay, you're going to be on resupply with us. So we need to have a credit card on file to, be able to go ahead and provide those additional supplies. Or if it's a rental, you're not just collecting the first month's rental up front. You're establishing a program for them to be on that 13-month cap rental or whatever it is. So it's automatic. And even if you don't know what their plan is going to pay, get the credit card on file. You can certainly estimate it so they know ballpark that, it's going to be around $50 a month or whatever. And they're prepared for that. But even better, the system that we have integrated with Nico allows the customer to establish the payment terms that they can afford and be able to go ahead and direct when that charge is going to occur so that they can plan for it versus just having these surprise charges show up one day because something finally gets paid by the insurance, drops to patient, it charges the card unexpectedly. So that gives the patient more control. And because they have control, you can get better participation. So going back to, Wayne's question, what's the one thing we should, take away is, get your payment up front, or establish payment terms up front. That expectation should be laid by whoever that person is meeting with if you're in a brick and mortar setting. And if it's, filling a patient order, there's still going to be engagement with the customer. So whoever has that engagement needs to make sure that they're setting the ground rules and getting the policies and procedures established with that customer so they have the right expectation of what to expect.
Yep, absolutely. It's part of, building a good process and then leveraging technology and tools to actually execute on it. But I actually just thought of an interesting question with some of the stuff you were saying. I don't know if you have any interesting statistics, just what you've seen over the years. There's other solutions out there where you can accomplish it, but I'm just curious how much you've noticed like the needle move if somebody goes from trying to do all of this themselves versus, for lack of a better word, outsourcing it or bringing on a partner like yourself, going from 0 to 1. I don't know if you have any interesting statistics. I always tell people if you're thinking about outsourcing, this might be one of the first areas to do it. You shouldn't have people in your office licking envelopes when there's a line of patients and a lot of stuff to do with not tons of resources.
Absolutely. I think when I started and we're trying to get over the hump of competitive bidding and all that type of stuff, and people weren't used to, collecting co-pays and all that stuff, believe it or not, the cash recovery was less than 50%. So half of their patient pay dollars were being left on the table. And if they didn't change because of reimbursement cuts, that percentage of what revenue that they were, losing was getting higher and higher because their reimbursements weren't, making up for it. There were, reduced reimbursements. And you still had this copay out there. And in many cases, the copay became the profit on the transaction. So you could not afford to go ahead and let that go. And that's really where I think the big shift came, was once people realized that, they said, okay, we do need to figure out a way to capture, what we've been missing. And that has today, that percentage, when we go in, we're still seeing 55, 60%. It's better than what it was, 10 years ago, but it's still not great. Even when people say they're doing a great job, when you really start digging down into it, there's a lot of meat still left on the bone, so to speak. And so when we go in and put a discipline in place, we can see a lift of 20, 25%. And that doesn't happen immediately, but within a reasonable period of time, like 90 days, you start seeing that recovery improve. And, I love the example that I may have shared this with you, Wayne, where we went into a company, nationally known company, and they put us in place, and they did have processes outsourced. They're doing it all in-house. And the first month we activated mid-month. So the first month that we had service, they gained about $5,000, less than $10,000 in recovery just in that first 15 days, which was great. But then the next month, they saw a difference, year over year difference of $120,000.
Wow.
And it kept growing. It went to 150, 170, and started plateauing at about $200,000 year over year, month to month.
Holy cow.
So a company like that, think about it. They're leaving almost, $1.2 million on the table. And you have to be a big company, right, to
Yep.
be able to
Sure.
to absorb that. But just think of what that did for the company, and now scale that down to a local, HME. You could still have the same type of results, and it may only be $10,000 or $5,000 a month. But think about that. That's paying their mortgage or their overhead, or you look at it on an annualized basis. That's a few FTEs that you just were able to go ahead and make up for.
For a small company, that could be a big deal, right?
Yeah, it is. It is.
That's awesome. That actually leads me to a second question. So actually, just last week, we hosted a webinar about our resupply functionality, and we're seeing a big shift towards texting and email campaigns.
Yep.
Away from some manual process like picking up the phone, or not even having a process, just building a systematic process to reach these patients by text. And the older population is, more of them have a smartphone, more of them are expecting a digital experience. Like, I give the example, my grandma's 90 and she FaceTimes me all the time.
Yep.
So out of that big number you just explained is a lot. I know you guys have a texting feature like text to pay. Are you seeing a bigger increase on text? Because I'm hearing a lot of people trying to get everything text because they're kind of tired of apps. They're tired of logging in. If they can just have something, they're texting their family all the time. If they could just see, hey, I can pay by text or be alerted via text, it definitely moves the needle from what we've seen. So curious if that's an angle of attack you guys are having success with. The
Great
collection rates.
success with. You bet. And that's something that, again, resistance. Oh gosh, what's the TCPA requirements around texting, or they get worried and hung up on all this stuff and go, well, one, our platform is high trust certified. So number one, we do everything not only by the book, but it's totally secure. And when it comes to text to pay or e-delivery and email to pay, all that type of stuff, those are links that take you right to a secure payment portal that you have to have dual authentication to go in to be compliant with PCI, all that. But it's so easy now, and the fact that you can go ahead and, if you have a bill in front of you and you go online, you can use your invoice number and account number, and that's dual authentication. So you can go right to the payment portal page and make your pay your bill. I mean, it's trying to make it so much easy and eliminate those barriers, right? And to your point, Wayne, people want things the way that they expect, and we're tied to these things, and so make it easy for them. They're getting their notification on their phone, one click, and they're in. They can take care of it and go on. Or if it's on auto pay, it's just a reminder, or it's there's my my receipt, whatever. So yes, to your question, we have seen people migrate to digital, and the challenges there is that, again, people have to learn at intake. You got to capture those patient demographic information, get the cell phone number, get the email, because if they do, now you have a good touch point. You have a way to connect with them. And
right. They say patients are really expecting to have an experience similar to Amazon, or how they use, their phone and
Yep.
other retail experiences. And there's no reason why it should be any different when it comes to healthcare.
Correct.
And kind of to Wayne's point as well, what the stat was around AARP was saying over 90% of elderly people are using smartphones already. So when it comes to that population, there's no reason why, that SMS or these other mobile friendly applications can't be used in a way
Right.
that can help not only the DME, but also help the patient as well.
Right. And I think, yes, there's a older population. You have this whole, I guess, worry about, the spam and scams and that type of thing. But you know what? You can make the communication very specific to your business.
That's right.
So they know it's coming from you, and you have ways. We can even do a welcome text, letting them know that on behalf of the provider, they'll be receiving an email notification or a text notification, so they can expect the communication going that way. Even if they've been told that at the time of service, it's just reinforcing it so that, it doesn't get lost.
Yeah, I mean, there's been
Yeah,
a lot
absolutely.
of technological advances, specifically in the space we're seeing. Things are happening pretty quickly in a shorter amount of time right now, and there's so much happening so quickly. And I guess my question really comes down to is like, what's a change that you'd like to see in the HME industry over the next 5 years? It's not happening right now.
Well, I mean, I think it's, big picture, it's the recognition of what our industry does for healthcare. And we have been the stepchild or whatever, for a lot of the healthcare industry. And, the HME DME industry is really one of the biggest advocates of keeping people in the home and keeping them healthy and out of the hospital, which is just driving up, healthcare costs tremendously. So if we can, recognize that and then really, work on the reimbursements, for crying out loud, that they're so out of whack right now where, we can't, provide the healthcare services that we need to patients because, oh my gosh, somebody gave me an example recently where, yes, they were covering a more rural area, but they were telling me that, if this oxygen tank leaves my dock, I'm losing like $30 on the delivery of that because of the reimbursements. So you have to make that up other places. Well, with reimbursement cuts being so slim, I mean, the margin's so slim because of reimbursement cuts, it's hard to make that up. So now you have to go ahead and limit services. So you say, okay, well, I'm going to be out there, next week. So I'll deliver that, that tank. Hope you have enough oxygen to make it to next Thursday.
Yep.
It's crazy.
It's crazy. Yeah.
Yeah. So those are the things that I want to see change, is the recognition of what we do, and then having a realistic, I guess, cost analysis done so they're fairly compensated for the services that they're providing. And we're such small potatoes when it comes to, the cost of healthcare, what hospitals are able to charge for. I mean, it gets to be ridiculous, and, look at anybody's hospital bill and you're just saying, how can that be that expensive? I don't get it.
Yeah, if you have like
Absolutely,
an
Bruce.
overnight in ER by accident somehow, and you look at the bill, it's like $150,000, and you get like one X-ray,
Yes.
one
Yes.
MRI, it's game over.
Oh,
It makes no sense.
it is crazy. So I just, it's out of balance. So I think that's really where I'd say, take a look at what the contribution is and reimburse appropriately for that contribution. And I think everybody would be better off. We'd have better health care. And honestly, probably would reduce our insurance costs, I mean,
Right.
because right now we're subsidizing all that stuff through our insurance. So
Come full circle. I know Wayne's been dying to do rapid fire questions with you, so he wants
Yep.
he's been talking
All right,
about it
we're-
all day. As soon as we got up this morning, he's like, I can't wait to do these
All right.
rapid fires with Bruce. So I don't know, Bruce, are you ready for this?
I don't
Yeah.
know. I got my bets on.
Yeah, this will be fun. So this is our rapid fire round. We're gonna call this "Would You Rather" Bruce edition.
Okay.
Would you rather win a golf tournament or close the biggest sale of your career?
Oh, absolutely close the biggest deal.
Let's see here. Would you rather give a keynote to 500 DME owners or host a dinner with 5 legends from our industry?
Oh, I would like to speak to the 500.
Yeah, I had a feeling you were going to say that. Bruce is a great speaker. He speaks at almost all
I can tell.
all the events we go to. So let's see here. Would you rather revisit your Sigma Phi Epsilon frat days or relive your first biggest healthcare deal?
Well, now, I don't know. My frat days were pretty darn good. But unfortunately, they've been kicked off campus, so I guess I can't relive it.
Bureaucratic answer. That's good. Is it because of
See
you?
here we got.
No, no.
You set the stage
No.
for that.
No.
All right, let's see. One more. Would you rather lose Wi-Fi for a week or your calendar?
I would.
That's a tough one.
Yeah, and I don't know. I'll say the Wi-Fi because I
Probably pretty
yeah,
nice to let go for a
I
minute.
have to live by my calendar, man.
Yeah.
I get it. Well, to wrap things up, I got one last question for you before you go. I think this would be a good one for anyone that's listening here. So if you can go back and give yourself a single piece of advice on your first day in the HV world, what would it be?
I do this with anybody new coming in. It's you've got to learn the industry, and by that I mean you really need to understand what do our providers do, and how do they do it. You've got to understand their world, and really to be able to relate to it. Otherwise, you're just another. I mean, I've met some great used car salesmen, but I've met some really, lousy ones, which all they care about is the transaction, right? Mm-hmm. They don't care about you after they've sold the car. So, you really have to understand what they're doing and how they're accomplishing it so that you then can go ahead and, insert what your solution is in a way that's meaningful and it's going to be beneficial and it's going to have that return on investment for the provider and accomplish their goals.
That's great. Right on. Thanks, Bruce. Well, this has been
You
fun.
bet.
This has been a good time, and I hope that all the other podcasts can go as smooth as this one. So.
Yeah.
No guarantees, but we'll see how it goes. But
Yeah,
thanks for your
thanks again,
time. We
Bruce.
appreciate it.
You bet. No, I love it. This was fun. Thank you for inviting me.
If we need more guests, we'll definitely circle back for a round 2 with Bruce for sure. More rapid fire questions. But this was awesome. We can't thank you enough for sharing your insights, and I'm sure our community will get excited when they hear this. And we'll tease them with the round 2 at some point later this year.
All right.
Cool. Thanks, guys.
Get it on our blog.
Awesome,
post.
Bruce.
Yeah, there you go.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Perfect.
Well, yeah. This might go viral, so stay tuned.